South Korea's president is tonight facing impeachment proceedings after he declared martial law, only to back down hours later. Yoon Suk Yeol's late-night address triggered uproar at home and sent shockwaves around the world, amid fears North Korea might seek to take advantage. Thousands of protesters surrounded the parliament building in Seoul, at times scuffling with soldiers and police. It's the first time since 1980 that martial law has been declared in South Korea. The Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade is warning Australians to avoid public protests and crowds.
Angry scenes outside Parliament as soldiers clash with protesters demanding that the president quit. At one stage, crowds surrounded a military vehicle trying to secure the area. While inside Parliament, aides built barricades and set off fire extinguishers to try to push the soldiers back. The president's extraordinary announcement came at 11:15 at night, accusing the opposition of hijacking the parliamentary process.
Through this martial law, I will rebuild and protect the free Republic of Korea, which is falling into the abyss of national ruin.
The declaration took even his closest aides by surprise. South Korea has a long history of military rule, but it's been a democracy since 1987.
국민 한 사람으로서 그냥 저희도 나서야겠다 생각하고요. 그냥 가만히 있어서는 안 된다고 생각합니다. 그러니까 너무나 예전에도 없었던 그런 독재 시대로 다시 돌아가는 것 같고 너무.
Although President Yoon's decree banned political activity, opposition politicians forced their way into Parliament to vote it down. Under South Korean law, the president must immediately lift martial law if Parliament demands it. His back-down broadcast live to a sleepless nation at 4:30 in the morning. Yoon came to power in 2022, in the tightest presidential election in South Korean history, but he's been unpopular amid a string of scandals and controversies, some involving his wife. In April, his People Power party suffered a landslide defeat, and he had struggled to get legislation through Parliament. South Korea is an important regional ally of the US, which has more than 28,000 troops in the country to deter any aggression by the nuclear-armed North.
Any domestic political instability in South Korea at a time when North Korea is emboldened clearly is going to be a source of great concern because it provides an opportunity for Kim Jong-un to make mischief.
Tonight, a general strike has been called and crowds remain on the streets of Seoul. Opposition parties say they're submitting an impeachment bill, with a vote possible as early as Friday. Nick Wells, SBS World News.
For more on the situation in Seoul, and let's bring in reporter Jan Cummins-Broomby. Good evening, Jan. Plenty of chaos there just hours ago, but what's the mood like now in Seoul?
Well, the place where I'm standing less than 24 hours ago was completely packed. It was the centre of this controversy, this political controversy that has gripped South Korea. Now the mood, the vibe has really changed. There are protesters still behind me, protesting, of course, the move to enact martial law that was taken by the president. But inside the parliament, right as we're speaking now, and in the last few hours, the opposition parties have been moving to impeach the president because he enacted martial law in a move they say was illegal, actually was not justified, and they're hoping to impeach him. They've threatened he can either resign or be impeached.
It seems that he's really got those two choices now, doesn't he, to resign or be impeached. What do you think will happen from here?
Well, that's really the big question that the people here are asking. It's also really the big question that the MPs inside the parliament will be asking. Even the MPs from his own party weren't consulted about this decision, they say. It's only a very select few people we think were actually aware that this was going to be happening before it happened. And moving forward, as we say, he really is faced with a tough choice. He seems to have backed himself up into a pretty difficult corner. It's like he's taken a big gamble, and a gamble that really doesn't seem like it's paid off. And most people think now this really does signal the end of his political career. You can't enact martial law, rescind it 6 hours later, and think you can still continue to be the president.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. That's Jan Cummins and Bruby updating us from Seoul. Thanks for your time. Syrian rebels are making significant gains and are at the gates of the key city of Hama, according to a UK-based war monitor. The UN Security Council has met for the first time to discuss the offensive led by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS, which it lists as a terrorist group. Meanwhile, a US-backed Kurdish coalition are battling government forces in the northeast, opening a new front along a vital supply route.
After seizing Aleppo, militants are making their way south on the main highway through Hama province, taking regime tanks along the way, pushing towards its capital city. They're riding high on the success of their surprise offensive. Syrian and Russian forces hitting back with airstrikes, and state media says reinforcements are arriving in the area. War Monitor, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, confirms rebels have captured 4 towns, just a few kilometres from Hama city, which has remained in government hands since civil war erupted in 2011.
God willing, all of Hama province will be fully liberated. After that, God willing, we will go to Homs, then to Damascus, and the rest of Syria will be liberated again.
Whether the insurgents can hold territory is the test. The observatory reports that just days after storming Hanasser, government forces have taken it back. The UN Security Council convening to discuss the sudden escalation, a session dominated by Russia and the US, accusing each other of supporting terrorism.
The fact that HTS is listed as a terrorist organization by the US and UN does not justify the further atrocities by the Assad regime and its Russian backers on schools and hospitals in both Idlib and Aleppo, causing civilian casualties.
Вы не нашли в себе смелости осудить очевидную террористическую атаку.
He is in no position to accuse the United States of supporting terrorist groups.
A few hours earlier, the US military struck a weapons system in eastern Syria after it said projectiles were launched towards its troops.
We're still assessing who is operating these weapons, but do know that there are Iranian-backed militia groups in the area that have conducted attacks on MSS Euphrates in the past.
Iran's foreign minister is considering sending troops should Damascus ask. Iraq's prime minister warning Baghdad won't sit back as a mere spectator, as he blamed Israeli strikes in Syria for the rebel advance. Northeastern Syria is a crowded proxy battleground. Years of stalemate shattered in a week.
A frozen conflict is not peace. Only a Syrian-led, Syrian-owned political solution will resolve the conflict and bring much-needed security and stability for Syrians.
Another 50,000 Syrians displaced in a matter of days. Many more are facing food shortages and fuel shortages, limiting their means to flee. Liz Maddock, SBS World News.
Israel and Hezbollah continue to trade accusations over ceasefire violations as strikes between the two resume. Israeli warplanes have also struck northern Gaza, including a school sheltering hundreds of Palestinians. The IDF says it's targeting Hamas militants using civilian buildings as cover, something Hamas denies. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is warning the war is not over and attacks inside Lebanon could be expanded.
Wounded children rushed into ambulances following an Israeli airstrike on a school in Gaza City's Zaytun suburb. Medics say 6 people were killed, several others left injured. Israel says it was targeting Hamas militants. At least 2 more Palestinians killed in the West Bank, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. Israel's military saying it attacked what it called a terrorist cell in the Aqaba area. On Saturday, Israeli airstrikes killed multiple aid workers in Gaza. The US now calling on Israel to investigate the allegations.
We urge Israel to thoroughly and transparently investigate actions like these and take appropriate action in their system, including ensuring accountability for any violations within their system.
Israel also carried out an airstrike in Syria, killing a man it described as Hezbollah's envoy to the Syrian army. The IDF announcing the attack in a rare public acknowledgement. Deadly strikes continuing in Lebanon, further shaking a tenuous ceasefire. Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to keep striking against what Israel says are violations of the truce by Hezbollah.
אנחנו אוכפים ביד ברזל את הפסקת האש הזאת, פועלים נגד כל הפרה, קלה כחמורה.
The country's defense minister also warning that if the ceasefire collapses, Israel would target not only Hezbollah but also the state of Lebanon.
ואנחנו נהיה עם מקסימום תגובה ואפס סובלנות.
The UN issued its own warning.
A complete reversal of the ceasefire decision would be really catastrophic.
Funerals have been held in southern Lebanon for Hezbollah fighters killed during hostilities. In attendance, Hezbollah MP Ali Fayyad, who accused Israel of violating the ceasefire.
ومن حق الشعب اللبناني أن يرد على هذه الاعتداءات على كل عدوان أو ممارسة لأعمال عدائية أو استهداف لمدنيين أو إمعان في هذه الممارسات.
Despite the fragility of the truce, efforts to rebuild have begun, and many of those who became displaced are now going home. 11-year-old Ali Hassan's family is also planning their return to southern Lebanon, where he'll finally be able to farewell his friend.
بتمنى إنه نرجع على لبنان ونروح زور قبره وأدعي له بالشهادة ونصيبه شو بدنا نعمل.
Others remain reluctant to return, uncertain about what will happen when the 60-day ceasefire ends. Mahno Zanguri, SBS World News.
Australia has changed its position, voting in favour of a UN resolution calling for Israel to end its occupation of the Palestinian territories. It's the first time it's supported the proposal at the UN General Assembly in more than 2 decades. Israel considers the West Bank and Gaza to be disputed territories.
As casualties mount in the war in Gaza, Australia's position on Palestinian statehood is changing. The last time Australia supported Israeli withdrawal from Palestinian territories at the UN was 2001, choosing to abstain ever since, until today.
And I give the floor to the representative of Australia.
Now seeing the resolution as a step towards a two-state solution.
A Palestinian state and the state of Israel, side by side, within safe, secure and internationally recognised borders.
The resolution demands an end to Israel's unlawful presence in the occupied Palestinian territories of Gaza, West Bank and East Jerusalem, including the removal of settlers from occupied territory, breaking ranks with the US and Israel to join 157 nations in favour. 7 abstained and 8 voted against. The shift in approach as the war between Israel and Hamas continues. Foreign Minister Penny Wong saying via a spokesperson, "Our only hope is working within the international community to push for an end to the cycle of violence and work towards a two-state solution." The opposition leader accusing Labor of pandering to the Greens.
We want to make sure that there's peace, and peace can operate if terrorist organisations aren't in control.
Australian Jewish leaders vehemently opposed.
We've seen historically, both in the Middle East and further afield, what happens when states unilaterally withdraw from territory. It's a recipe for more war, violence, terrorism and general disaster.
Australia's new support welcomed by Palestinian advocates.
This brings us one step closer to peace, as we saw in the battle against apartheid in South Africa, when the international community came together to boycott, sanction that apartheid regime. The international community needs to do that here.
The UN resolution also calls for an international conference aimed at achieving a two-state solution. Edwina Guinan,